Second part. A bit of the twilight yet remained. The villagers of Mongs couldn't get through the day without drink, and with the strange group that had called on the village the previous night as their grist, they were taking their cups in the one privately owned bar room, and the hotel bar, when shouts unexpectedly rang out. As if chased by monsters, everyone in both places raced out into the street, where a girl stood, pointing and murmuring like a lunatic. The castle. There's a light in a window of the castle. Following the fingertip that trembled with surpassing terror, what should the villagers see? Page break. What's that sound? Standing before a half-pitched tent, Vera pricked up her ears. Vibrations seemed to be rising beneath her feet, a rumbling in the earth. There's going to be an avalanche. Dee and the aircraft are in danger. Before Cray had finished shouting, everyone turned their eyes to the peak soaring behind the ridge. What's that? Lurie murmured in dumbfounded surprise. The mountain's changing. Page break. An intense jolt hit Dee's body. It was so fierce it seemed it would shake the flesh from his bones. But it didn't stop the hunter. Chunks of rock came free, striking Dee's shoulder and hat as they fell. More than a couple of times, protrusion he was clinging to broke off. Each time, his feet halted his fall. After a drop of over 50 yards, his left hand squeaked, "You lucky bastard. Just once I'd like to see what had happened to you if you fell 1,000 yards and slammed into the ground." Before long, Dee reached the summit. An ordinary pinnacle of rock challenged the sky. That was all there was. "Forget the castle. There ain't signs of so much as a tent up here." Dee turned the palm of his grumbling hand downward. "Hmm?" A little cry of surprise rang out. What Dee had seen had vanished without a trace. The rock shelf now jutted out much farther, forming a gigantic crucible of boiling lava that was spreading in all directions. So, rock gives birth to rock. The hoarse voices muttering stopped when it saw objects rising from the lava. Muddy walls and iron beams swiftly took shape, fitting together to form chambers large and small. All were cast from the red molten rock, or rather, from the iron it contained. Both the pipes that dripped hot slag as they carried molten metal, and the colossal ladles that scooped the necessary amount of iron from the crucible for other forms of transport caught the breeze of cooling fans formed from melted iron, swiftly cooling and taking final shape. "This is an incredible system. Looks like he intends to build his home from scratch, starting with the smelting of the raw materials." Before the voice had finished speaking, the rock that loomed before Dee split. Though Dee covered himself with the hem of his coat, he was still blown back 30 feet, and as he flew, he saw the flaming iron beams tower higher. The cords wrapped together, the tubes fit one into another, and the parabolic antenna of an interstellar communication system take shape. "All of this must be powered by anti-energy. How will he make an anti-proton reactor? Molding all the circuits, getting and refining the raw materials. What a pain in the ass." The hoarse voice, sounding almost casual, streamed into the air. Dee, without anything to grab hold of, was going straight down, falling toward the world of molten metal below, where the work continued. "So, what are you gonna do?" "If I burn up, can you bring me back?" That'd probably be worth a shot. In the past, there was a noble who fell into the Medieval volcano, but then, you're not quite like him." What became of that nobleman? He didn't return to normal. He'd buffeted Dee's face. He was less than 5 seconds from a swirling morass of fiery steel heated to tens of thousands of degrees. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1. Page break. "Did you see that just now?" shouted a man peering through a telescope in the village lookout tower. The villager next to him didn't even have time to finish asking, "See what?" "There's a rock shelf around the 1500-yard point. It's turning into a castle up there. I saw a person fall down into it, but just as they were about to go splat, they sprouted wings." "You're out of your mind." The man beside him spat condescendingly, but the man with the telescope just leaned forward, using his free hand to wipe the perspiration from his brow. It was cold sweat. It was just like they turned into this huge pitch-black bat or something. When I was a tyke, I heard about that from my granny time and again. Real nobles can turn into bats, she used to say. That was genuine noble. Page break. The hunter made a soundless landing on top of a partitioning wall. Bluish smoke began to rise from the soles of his boots. The wall was still burning. One of the hundreds of enormous red-hot cranes carried a burning iron plate, leaping without a sound. Dee landed on top of it. A black shadow loomed over his head, and then the snowstorm stopped. The ceiling had been completed. It covered an area that was clearly even vaster than what Dee had looked down upon. Already several hundred floors worth of corridors had begun snaking out in all directions. When an iron beam made contact with the nearby floor, Dee jumped for it. He'd just barely make it. The jump was about 50 yards. There was even a handrail. His left hand reached out, but not far enough. His right hand flashed into action. Striking in the same motion, the blade bit into the handrail. All he had to do was put some strength into his right arm, and he was over the rail. The spot where his sword and the handrail met was tinged with crimson. "A beam cannon?" Even before the hoarse voice asked that question, the figure in black tilted deeply, dropping down once again like a bird of unearthly beauty, falling, this time, into a bottomless abyss. Again the hem of his coat flared out. He dropped quickly, like a stone, and landed like the snow, seemingly without weight or sound. White smoke and flame spouted from the chest of Dee's coat. During the fall, he'd been blasted with lasers. Crimson flashes streamed in front of Dee and behind him, to his right and to his left. Walls and pipes were vaporized, reduced to ions and nothingness. Dee was standing on a passageway that jutted from a stone wall. The nobility preferred classical materials and architecture to ultra-modern styling. "Hurry up, once you're inside." Dee had broken into a dash before he even heard the hoarse voice. Running 50 yards in less than 2 seconds, he charged through a black entranceway. One shake of his body was enough to extinguish the flames that burned on his back and waist. The laser blast had been ferocious. His dash had put out most of the flames, and the shake took care of the last remnants. "You were shot in 14 places. Forget humans. Even a major nobleman would need 4 or 5 days of complete bed rest after that. On account of how the cells get burned right out. I'm surprised you could still run." It was unclear what Dee made of that voice as his feet pounded down the stone pathway, racing around the 7th corner before halting. Unlike the path he was on, and the stone walls ahead were undulating. It was unclear what Dee made of that voice as his feet pounded down the stone pathway, racing around a seventh corner before halting. "From here on, it's incomplete," said Dee. "Give me an analogical inference of this castle's layout." A moment later, the hoarse voice replied, "You're a regular slave driver. If I do that, my brain will be fried for 2 or 3 days. If your head needs cooling off, I can do it any time." There was another silence, and then the voice said, "Oh, did you just tell a joke? Well, I can die now without any regrets." Squeezing his left hand tight once to choke out the disagreeable voice, Dee turned down a corridor where the walls rippled like waves. By analogical inference, he meant that he wanted his left hand to come to a precise conclusion from insufficient data and commit it to memory. Because this overtaxed part of the brain, reaching an incorrect conclusion could leave a person broken and useless. Once the castle was complete, data relating to it would have to be taken from the master computer, but the defensive systems surrounding it would undoubtedly be fully operational. The quickest way to get that data would be to read it from an as-yet uncompleted area, like drawing a blood sample from a vein, so to speak. And it was necessary to do so before its defensive armaments were fully installed. Bending down the rippling corridor, Dee extended his left hand toward the floor. 5 seconds passed, then 10. "Good enough." The words escaped weakly from his left hand. Dee stood up. "My head's burning. Can't take any more." The hunter said to his groaning left hand, "Do you know what room Gilson would occupy?" His voice was cold, showing not the slightest concern for anyone else's circumstances. "More or less. I need that, and the central control room. First to the former." Dee turned around. Countless figures were barreling around the corner. "So, has the castle security finally risen again?" The left hand murmured unconcernedly. At the fore were a number of guards in rough armor who carried rifles. Purple streaks of light stretched from them. Particle beams. Though the beams flew straight, you could hardly say the shooter's aim was true. Dee charged like a black cyclone through the enemy fire. Naked steel flashed out, and helmeted heads sailed through the air. It was a horribly comical tableau. Second part, end.